Good afternoon, and thank you for coming to this spring budget forum to get an overview of the fiscal year 25-26 tentative budget and an update on regarding where we are right now with our current budget. So today, I'm going to give you an overview of our fiscal year 24-25 budget, status update where we're at, give you an overview of the governor's January budget, discuss the BC fiscal year 25 tentative budget, and give you an overview also of some of our capital and schedule maintenance projects, and give you an overview of our end of year deadlines, including budget. So as it relates to the fiscal year 24-25 budget, these numbers are as of April 17th, 2025. As you can see, we started our budget off with $232 million. As of April 17th, we're at $127 million. To give you some insights on these numbers, first of all, as of salary expenses as of March. So in these numbers, you have 9 months of salary expenses. As it relates to our operating expenses, because we currently, based on our year-end deadlines, have processed invoices, purchase orders, focal change forms as of December 31st. And so when you're looking at our remaining budget, it seems a little high as of March because you would expect 9 months of spending, but there is a little bit of noise in the numbers as it relates to some of the timing of processing. The January budget update. As it relates to the governor's insight on the budget for fiscal year 25-26, during that time, the January budget update was positive. We were expecting approximately $322 billion extra dollars in the state of California budget, which primarily related to higher state receipts, and also the governor had a cost reduction strategy as it relates to not hiring some of the vacancies and some of the operational efficiency plans that he had for the state. In the governor's budget, he stated that he was going to keep Prop 98 funding flat, which is basically our baseline for state funding. As it relates to community colleges, he expressed his strong support as it relates to the funding of community college. He wanted to maintain his focus on the master plan for career education, which included, let me check, make sure I have this in my notes, accessibility and affordability, workforce training, career passport, which focuses on workforce skills, and career pathways as it relates to high school and college students. He was supportive of continuing general fund spending, allocating one-time funding for a system-wide common data platform, scaling up for prior learning policies, and supporting capital outlay from Proposition 51 and 2. As it relates to the student-centered funding formula that particularly impacts community college, that funding, he was promising us approximately $204 million infused in our budget, which included a cost of living increase of approximately 2.4% and approximately 0.5% for FTES growth, or full-time equivalent student growth. As it relates to Proposition 51 and 2, Bakersfield College benefited from Proposition 2 as it relates to the Center for Student Success. As President Flagger has mentioned in many of the open forums, we're in the process of preparing for that new build. As it relates to other one-time items that the governor has promised, he promised approximately $133 million one-time spend and $29 million ongoing for system-wide common cloud data platform, $168 million for statewide technology, and another $100 million, $93 million, and $7 million to build up credit for prior learning. As it relates to the governor may revise, that has not occurred yet. But since we've had the January budget update, there has been some changes in the economy. First of all, we had the California fires that has significantly impacted the state of California. We quite don't know at this time how that's going to impact the May revise. And also the state of the current economy as it relates to tariffs. We've had currently, the stock market has reached some of the lowest points in several years. And so those are some of the concerns as it relates to funding and the May revise. Bakersfield, our tentative budget. So we've been working on the tentative budget as it relates to our college budget premise. Our initial, as it relates to our budget initially, we are receiving an additional $13 million of funding. Basic is related to our student-centered funding formula. That's the first level of the formula where we get the 70% based on our FTEs. We're expecting, last year we received 11.8 million. This year we're receiving 13.13 million. For credit, we're receiving 81.6 million. Last year we received 79.4 million. As it relates to dual enrollment, we're receiving 21.9 versus 18.2 million last year. Incarcerated and non-credit, we're receiving 3.1 million versus 4.8 million. Supplemental is expected to be 40 million versus 34.7 million. And our success metric is 21 million versus 19.8 million. And as it relates to some of the expenses, we're expecting overall from a classified perspective, pay increases of 2.12% on average that will impact the budget. Our STRS contribution has remained flat. PERS is increasing by 0.35%. You may wonder, how are we receiving this $3 million increase? As KCCD has been reviewing their budget modeling, one of the things that they've been looking at is how do we get more money to the colleges for operations, because in the past few years, we had quite amount of money that gets transferred into the reserve. And so KCCD has been looking at how do we get more money into our operating budget. In this estimate, what they've done is, for instance, there's a deficit factor factored into the budget. Previously, that number has been around between 5 and 7%. This year, for fiscal year 25-26, they reduced the deficit factor by 3.5%. So that added more money into our budget. And also, as it relates to our FTES estimate, normally they go with a lower baseline, but for fiscal year 25-26, the baseline for our FTES increased slightly, more in line with our current FTES. This is what we receive as it relates to our faculty obligation number. The schedule is a little bit confusing, but I will give you an overview. As it relates to the faculty obligation number, we started with 351. We have been approved to hire 16 additional faculty. And so that will lead us going into fiscal year 25 with 367 faculty. If I misexplain that, I see.
I just want to be clear. The 16 does not represent the allocation of 16 new faculty lines. That represents the replacement, the hiring of replacements for resignations and retirements.
Thank you, President. Our fiscal year 25-26 tentative budget. Based on the information that we have received as it relates to our premise information, for fiscal year 25, we're estimating that revenues from our tentative budget will be estimated at $250 million. This includes $192 million as it relates to our state appropriation, lottery, mandated costs, and plus our reserves of $57 million. And how did we come up with the $57 million being transferred to reserves? So every year the district goes back and they perform a carry forward calculation for the previous years. Because when we do our budget, it's an estimate as it relates to the revenue. So once the final numbers come in as it relates to the various revenue categories, they go back in and they true those numbers up to actuals. And so that's where we come up with this carry forward calculation that tells us, okay, this is how much we're going to contribute to reserves. So from the 23-24 carry forward calculation, there's an estimate of $10 million being transferred into reserves for our fiscal year 25-26 budget. And hopefully, and if you see at our beginning balance, we started with 56 million. For our fiscal year 24-25, we were approved to do a one-time spend of 5.8 million. And this number is related to some salary changes. And so that gave us a net reserve that we transferred in for our fiscal year 24-25 at 50 million. And then plus our carryover, we were estimating our fiscal year 25-26 reserves to be 60 million. Earlier in the fiscal year, we had to do a reserve request because in the previous fiscal year 23-24, there was another request as it related to, they wanted BC to spend down reserves. And because when we have a lot of facility capital projects and they carry over to the next year. And so what occurred was that we didn't transfer the money into the right fund for those funds to be carried forward. And so those automatically, all leftover funding reverts back to the reserve. So we had to go back to KCCD and the Finance Committee to request those funds so that we could pay the project expenses. And so less that 3.2 million, that's how we come up with the 57 million estimate going into our calculating our reserves. And so this is a historical perspective as it relates to our GUI reserve. The minimum requirement for our GUI reserve is 5% of our GUI budget. And so as you see, well, we haven't gotten to the point of adopted budget. That's why it says tentative, but the last three years are our adopted budget compared to what we're expecting from a tentative budget perspective. And you can see that the 10 million is taking us pretty up there. And this is our minimal requirement. As it relates to our categoricals, from a budget perspective, some of our categoricals are receiving a slight increase. Adult education is receiving a 2.43 increase. Our EOP program, our disabled student programs and services, apprenticeship, and our CalWorks program will experience a slight cost of living increase. As it relates to our categorical restricted tentative budget, we're estimating for fiscal year 25, we will be at approximately 66 million versus 73 million the previous year. And as you can see, even in 23-24, we had a higher categorical restricted tentative budget. And some of this is because in these years, we still had COVID funding that we were trying to spend down. And so as it relates to some of that COVID funding, it's considered restricted. And as we're closing out some of those, we closed out HERF last year. We're in the process of closing out the COVID-19 block grant. And so you'll start seeing that our categoricals will come back more in line with where they were previously. And we've had a couple grants in the current fiscal year that naturally ended that won't be carried over for next fiscal year. Capital and scheduled maintenance. So in March, we submitted our draft of our 5-year construction plan. And so I wanted to share with the college what that looked like for our campus. Of course, we have the agricultural building, which is currently in construction and scheduled to be completed spring of 2026. Student housing is currently being constructed and is scheduled to be completed in 2026 as well. We're working on new soccer fields. That's in the design phase. The CFF building, the Center for Student Success, is on that. The pool and maintenance building And also the Delano campus monument sign, sidewalk, and landscape. New construction that's being considered is the teaching kitchen for culinary arts. The fine arts building is on that list. And then as it relates to other capital improvement, wayfinding. Wayfinding is the signage that you see around campus that directs people to the various buildings, and then the old gym upgrades. Summer projects. This year, we're going to have a number of summer projects that will be conducted on campus. Some of them are scheduled maintenance. We have interior and exterior painting that is scheduled to start immediately after commencement. So we'll be doing the performing arts, outdoor theater and entry, fine arts. We're doing the restrooms at the baseball fields, general sciences, math sciences, the baseball clubhouse, the press boxes, and some stadium outside walls. And other scheduled maintenance projects that we're working on is the Delano Monument sign, some interior lighting retrofit to upgrade some of the lighting because some of the buildings have some of the older lighting. And so we're looking at LED lighting, some other low cost lighting for those areas. We're starting phase one of the restroom remodels. We're doing the language arts restroom upgrades, the campus-wide repair project. We're also replacing the concrete in the humanities open area right there where the steps are. We're working on replacing the baseball dugouts. We're doing the wall and floor covering in the library, some artificial turf installation in certain areas of the campus. We'll be working on the Delano Welding Lab, which will start in late summer. And then in October, we'll start working on some of the chillers, for instance, in Allied Health, the form air handler replacement, and some HVC work in the Science and Technology building. And then we're hoping in the fall to work on phase two of the restrooms. And then solar has been a project all year long. So we're continually to work on the solar on campus. These are our budget deadlines as it relates to May and June. One of the things that I wanted to highlight for the college is that please make sure that you have your purchase orders in by May 29th. That is the cutoff for fiscal year. So if you can get all of your purchase orders and documents in by that time, well, not all documents, but your purchase order related documents by that time, it would be greatly appreciated, because if you get your documents in on time, it'll allow the budget office and I to do some analysis as it relates to where we can predict where we're going to end for our fiscal year 24-25 budget. Are there any questions?
We don't have any questions in the Q&A at this time. And then we're being advised that the Q&A is being disabled, has been disabled.
Is it because Joe Ellen was the?
Okay, now it's working. Are you getting? Not in, oh, there we go, we got one. Okay. Dr. Jimenez states, thank you for the presentation and timeline. I know the CSUs are getting significant cuts to their budget. Do you suspect we'll be in better shape come May revise?
I am,
We're not in bad shape now.
you know, we're not,
CSUs are getting the cuts, not us.
oh, yeah, we're not. The governor has stated earlier that he has strong support for community colleges. And so at this time, not expecting any significant impacts to the community college. As I stated before with the May revise, not quite sure because of, you know, the fires down in LA, if that's going to have an impact on what he promised.
That is the only question so far.
Any other questions? Good. Okay, well, that concludes our spring budget forum. Thank you everyone for coming. The presentation will be posted on the website.
Yeah, copy online. Oh, look, we got clapping hands.